The legacy of David's tree. David Levin sat quietly in his modest Tel Aviv kitchen, the steam from his tea curling upwards as the city's peaceful morning sounds seeped through the open window. At 73, his days had settled into an unbroken cycle of reflection and inertia. Once a passionate history teacher, brimming with stories from the past, he now seemed to avoid his own present, his home, a museum of untouched memories. Out in the backyard stood a fig tree, its branches heavy with neglect. This tree had once been the pride of the neighborhood, providing shade and sweet fruit that David and his late wife Miriam generously shared with their community. But now the tree's sparse leaves mirrored David's own sense of stagnation, its drooping branches a silent testimony to abandonment. One morning, a sharp knock intruded on his thoughtful routine. He opened the door to find Eli, the 10-year-old boy from next door, holding a small basket. "Mr. Levin," Eli began with warm curiosity, "why don't you pick the figs anymore?" David hesitated, glancing at his weary tree. "The tree's too old, and so am I," he replied, smiling faintly. Eli's young gaze didn't waver. "But it's still alive," he insisted with a mix of hope and determination. "My dad says living things need care, no matter how old they are." The boy's words drifted into David's thoughts long after Eli had left, mingling with floods of past memories. Miriam laughing as she held baskets of figs, neighborhood children squealing with joy as they climbed the sturdy branches, his own kids lingering beneath its familiar shade. Could it really be? Could life, both his and the trees, still take on new meaning? The next morning, David stood before the tree, gloves on and shears in hand. The tools, long buried in his cluttered garage, felt unfamiliar and heavy. Still, he began trimming, digging, and watering, finding himself utterly enveloped in the acts of nurturing life. For the first time in years, David felt alive. The physical labor sharpened his senses bit by bit as he tended to the tree's every need. But unknown to him, these efforts would soon extend far beyond the backyard fence. Word began to spread. A fig tree once forgotten was springing back to life. One afternoon, Rebecca Goldstein, a young 25-year-old marketing professional working in the city, stopped by while heading to work. She leaned over the fence, watching David. "You've done wonders with that tree," she remarked, watching a smile appear on his face. "Well," David began as he wiped the sweat from his brow, "it's amazing what happens when you start caring for something, even things you think are too far gone." Rebecca lingered. "Can I ask you something? How do you know what's worth caring for?" Something in her tone gave her away. David gestured for her to sit. Over the next hour, she spilled her heart. Despite her thriving corporate career, Rebecca felt hollow, longing to trade PowerPoint slides and boardrooms for her dream of launching a sustainable fashion venture. David nodded, listening quietly before leading her toward the tree. Now dotted with budding leaves, its branches seemed to stretch with newfound vigor. This tree had every reason to give up. It was neglected, ignored, but it adapted, and so can you. Rebecca returned often after work, scribbling designs on scraps of paper from beneath the growing fig tree. As David worked nearby, she found both confidence and clarity. Her evenings in David's backyard felt like a promise of something greater, a budding ambition ready to bloom. Samuel Cohen, a carpenter just entering his 40s, found himself battling setbacks far heavier than sawdust. The woodworking business he had built years ago was faltering under market pressures, leaving him disillusioned. Walking through the neighborhood one evening, he couldn't help but notice David's backyard, where families gathered beneath the developing canopy of the restored fig tree. One day, Samuel's 10-year-old son, Levi, came bounding home, waving a drawing. "Dad, Mr. Levin says we're going to build a bench under the fig tree. You have to help!" Reluctantly, Samuel agreed. From that weekend, he joined the project. At first, it felt mechanical, just another chore. But as nails found their places and the bench's shape began forming, Samuel felt an old, familiar joy rekindle. By the time the bench was complete, he realized he hadn't just made furniture. He had reconnected to his craft. The praise from neighbors who visited David's garden, and the love from his son, who proudly told everyone about his father's contribution, gave Samuel something he thought he'd lost: confidence. Soon, he took bolder steps to transform his business into a workshop for custom, handcrafted furniture, rediscovering his purpose while strengthening the bond with his family. David's garden became a bridge for people of all walks of life. Children played with tireless enthusiasm, while older neighbors shared quiet stories. Young professionals like Rebecca and Samuel returned often, their transformations inspiring others to unearth their own dreams. Rebecca's sustainable fashion designs moved from sketches to reality. With encouragement from her growing circle of mentors, her clothing line found a home in local markets and online stores. Meanwhile, Samuel's furniture business flourished as his unique creations became community staples. Rebecca later collaborated with him, commissioning bespoke displays for her clothing brand. David stood at the heart of it all, a man who had once been resigned to solitude, now surrounded by laughter, creativity, and shared moments of growth. To mark the tree's rebirth and the community it had fostered, David planned a festival. Neighbors set up tables boasting food from many kitchens, while children adorned the branches with ribbons and paper lanterns. Laughter rang through the yard as people celebrated not only the tree, but the small transformations it had inspired. Rebecca spoke candidly about her fears, the courage she'd taken from David, and the success her clothing line had seen against the odds. Samuel shared his journey of rediscovery, holding back tears as he spoke about how reconnecting with his talent had renewed his faith in himself and his family. Finally, David addressed the group, his voice steady yet filled with reflective conviction. This tree reminded me of something I had forgotten. Growth doesn't have to stop because of age or circumstance. We're all capable of renewal when we extend care to others, to ourselves, and to what truly matters. At the festival's end, 2 unexpected guests called out to David. His children, having traveled from abroad, had come after hearing tales of the event and their father's newfound legacy. Embracing him under the fig tree's shade, they added their own piece to the story. A family reunited and healed. Years passed, but the garden thrived. Its open gates welcomed workshops, storytelling gatherings, and communal celebrations. David's once neglected tree became a symbol of resilience, a reminder for many to pause, reflect, and nurture life's meaningful connections. Rebecca's sustainable fashion brand continued to grow internationally, but she never forgot the lessons learned beneath those branches. Samuel's furniture business became a hub of craftsmanship, his passion spreading to his apprentices. And David, he sat each day under the tree, surrounded by the echoes of community, a man who'd rediscovered purpose, proving that growth, no matter your age or challenges, always remains within reach.